Hello, my name is Donna Korchinski and I'm in Calgary. My step-grandfather, Harry Levitsky, we know him as Dito Levitsky, as we called him, was interned at Castle Mountain during the First World War. You know, the story of the First World War internment is a tragedy in more ways than one. It was a tragedy for the Ukrainian community as a whole, but it was also a tragedy for our family. Like my Dito story, so many of them were lost. That was the tragedy. You know, when I was growing up, I didn't have a clue about this event. Nobody ever spoke about it in our home. Not my Dito, my parents, no one. To this day, I don't know if it was too shameful or too painful or maybe not important enough to talk about, but I doubt it. But you know, I'll never know. How I came to learn about the internment was when I became president of the Ukrainian Canadian Professional and Business Federation. There I met scholars, Lubomir Chuk, Bogdan Kardon, and the Toronto lawyer John Gregorowicz, and our own Boris Sidorik here in Calgary. These folks were working doggedly and passionately to tell the world about the internment and also seeking redress for this injustice from the Canadian government. You know, as I learned more and more about the injustice to our people, these were our people who sacrificed to come to Canada, which was to them the land of freedom. I became angry. Why didn't I know about it at home? The only one thing that I learned later was that when my step-grandfather, Harry Levitsky, returned from the internment, he asked my father to write a letter to the government. He asked him to write it because he believed that he was entitled for pay for the time he was interned, 25 cents a day for every day he was interned. Well, my dad wrote the letter, but guess what? There was no response. And my dad didn't follow up on it. You know, Ukrainians are polite. Ukrainians are polite. You know, I was a journalist at the time and I was always hungry for information. So I went to the Glenbow Museum, to the archives here in Calgary, and I pulled some documents. And what I found pictures, photographs, but I didn't find like the intimate stories. I found a logbook from the commander of the camp, the military commander, and they were very straight, you know, just the facts, folks. No descriptions of the hardships of the cold and the sweltering heat or the lack of warm clothing or the lack of food, lack of water, the drudgery, the backbreaking, pounding, digging, and lifting. No, none of that, none of that. The attempted escapees and deaths were footnotes by the commander. Footnotes, that was it. The irony was that my grandfather was listed in the logs, but they sure made a mess of the spelling of his name. I learned two things from this experience. The first is the absolute need for education of the injustice of the internment, you know, for the Ukrainian community. Education of the public in general, education in the schools, universities, neighbors, friends, family, community, especially the young people. And for those of Ukrainian background, they will begin to understand their roots. The second lesson I learned from the internment is that of the absolute need to forgive. We must forgive. Yes, it was a wrong. Yes, we need reparations, and we have received that. But if we do not forgive, we're stuck. We remain perpetual victims. We can't move on. If we don't forgive, it eats us from the inside. It eats us individually as persons and as a community. We need to rise above with dignity, but we cannot stop talking about it. So why not this? Next time you drive to Banff, go out to Castle Mountain, see the site, the plaque, there's a plaque there. Make a pilgrimage to the cave and basin. Just imagine in your mind how these men felt. Feel their suffering, how physically tired they were, how hungry they were, how cold, how lonely, how hopeless. Hear their voices, see their faces, see their tears. You will feel their energy there. And thank our forefathers for their sacrifice. I thank my Dito for his sacrifice.